When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company had just 5% of the computer market and was almost broke. When Jobs died of cancer 14 years later, Apple was the second most valuable corporation in the world, just slightly behind ExxonMobil. In his new biography of Jobs, Walter Isaacson writes that he revolutionized or reimagined 7 industries: personal computers, animated movies, music, telephones, tablet computing, digital publishing, and retail stores. He did it, Isaacson says, by standing at the crossroads of science and the humanities, connecting creativity with technology and combining leaps of imagination with feats of engineering to produce new devices that consumers hadn't even thought of.
The story will continue in a moment.
Thank you for coming. We're going to make some history together today.
If you had to pick a day where it all came together, January 9, 2007 is not a bad one. Jobs is in San Francisco at the Macworld conference in full pitchman mode as he unveils his latest product to the faithful.
These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone.
It is not only a remarkable achievement, but a validation of everything that Jobs believed in. If you made and controlled all of your own hardware and all of your own software, you could integrate all of your products and all of your content seamlessly into one digital hub. And no one but Steve Jobs had thought of it.
This is something Microsoft couldn't do because it made software but not the hardware. It's something Sony couldn't do because it made a lot of devices but it didn't really make software operating system. And so the only company that had end-to-end control was Apple.
Biographer Walter Isaacson writes that Jobs had created a walled garden. If you wanted to use any of his products, it was easier to buy into the whole Apple ecosystem. It was something only a complete control freak could have pulled off. His personality, passions, products, and private life were all intertwined and closely guarded. The more of it that Walter Isaacson got to see, the more he learned.
What was his house like?
His house in Palo Alto is a house on a normal street with a normal sidewalk, no big winding driveway, no big security fences.
You could drive in the driveway?
You could walk into the garden in the back gate and open the back door to the kitchen, which used to not be locked. It was a normal family home, and he said, I wanted to live in a normal place where the kids could walk, the kids could go over to other people's houses, and I did not want to live that not-so-lavish lifestyle that so many people do when they get rich.
There was no live-in help and no entourage. He was worth $7 billion, but not materialistic, and he told Isaacson in a taped interview that he had learned early on what money could do to people.
I saw a lot of other people at Apple, and especially after we went public, how it changed them. And a lot of people thought they had to start being rich. So they would, I mean, a few people went out and bought Rolls Royces, and they bought homes, and their wives got plastic surgery, I saw these people who were really nice, simple people turn into these bizarro people. And I made a promise to myself. I said, I'm not going to let this money ruin my life.
Do you have a picture of the family?
Oh, sure. Look,
Isaacson showed us some personal family pictures that Jobs had given him for his book shortly before he died. It was a look into a part of Jobs' life that few people had seen.
This is Lorene, that's Aaron, Reed, Eve, and this is on their family vacation.
Jobs married Lorene Powell 20 years ago, a former investment banker who could hold her own with her mercurial husband.
And she's a great balance. He knows to pick strong people to be around him, and he sure did when he married Lorene.
Now, this is
Reed, his son. Reed is very much like his father, except for he has his mother's kindness. Eve is a great horseback rider. Eve, I think, might someday be in the Olympics with horseback riding. Aaron has a great sense of design. He's a really cool kid.
His fourth child is Lisa Brennan Jobs, the daughter Jobs had with his girlfriend 33 years ago and neglected for more than a decade, until she moved in with the family as a teenager. Isaacson said their reconciliation was important to Jobs because his own birth parents had abandoned him.
He felt there was a hole He felt something was missing.
In 1986, he began searching for his biological mother and found Joanne Scheibel Simpson living in Los Angeles.
Did she know that her son, the son that she gave up, was Steve Jobs?
No, but she says to him, there's one thing I have to tell you. You have a sister. And the sister I raised, we did not put up for adoption. And I must tell her, because I've never told this. And the sister turns out to be Mona Simpson, the novelist. And Mona Simpson and Steve Jobs totally bond, separated at birth, as they say. And then they go on a quest, a journey, to find the birth father. Especially Mona wants to find what she calls the lost father.
Eventually, they locate Abdul Fattah John Jandali, a Syrian-American with a Ph.D. in political science who is managing a restaurant in Sacramento. But as Jobs tells Isaacson on tape, he decides to let Mona go meet him alone.
When I was looking for my biological mother, obviously, was looking for my biological father at the same time. And I learned a little bit about him, and I didn't like what I learned. And I asked her to not tell him that we had ever met and not tell him anything about me.
So Mona goes to the coffee shop, meets this guy, Mr. Jandali, who's running it, who says, among other things, when she asks, how sorry he is, but then he says that he had had another child, and Mona said, what happened to him? He said, oh, I don't know, we'll never hear from him again. And then he says, I wish you could have seen me when I was running a bigger restaurant. I used to run one of the best restaurants in Silicon Valley. Everybody used to come there. Even Steve Jobs used to eat there. And Mona is sort of taken aback and bites her tongue and doesn't say, Steve Jobs is your son. But she looks shocked, and he says, yeah, he was a great tipper.
And I was in that restaurant once or twice, and I remember meeting the owner, who was from Syria, and it was most certainly him. And I shook his hand, and he shook my hand, and that's all.
And Jobs never spoke to him, never talked to him, never got in touch with him, never wanted to see him.
Not even when Jobs was on his deathbed. The cancer that eventually killed him was discovered accidentally while he was being checked for kidney stones back in 2004. A CAT scan showed a shadow on his pancreas that turned out to be a malignant tumor.
And then they do a biopsy, and they're very emotional. They say, this is good. It's one of these very slow-growing 5% of pancreatic cancers that can actually be cured. But Steve Jobs doesn't get operated on right away. He tries to treat it with diet. He goes to spiritualists. He goes to various ways of doing it macrobiotically, and he doesn't get an operation.
Why doesn't he get it operated on immediately?
I've asked him that. He said, I didn't want my body to be open. And soon everybody is telling him, quit trying to treat it with all these roots and vegetables and things. Just get operated on. But he does it 9 months later.
Too late.
Well, one assumes it's too late because by the time they operate on him, they notice that it has spread to the tissues around the pancreas.
How could such a smart man do such a stupid thing?
I think that he kind of felt that if you ignore something, if you don't want something to exist, you can have magical thinking. And it had worked for him in the past. He regretted, some of the decisions he made. And certainly, I think he felt he should have been operated on sooner.
Jobs acknowledged his surgery but soft-pedaled the seriousness of the situation. Isaacson writes he continued to receive secret cancer treatments even though he was telling everyone he had been cured. And that is what people believed until 2008.
In 2008, he unveiled the iPhone 3, but that wasn't the main story.
All of a sudden, people are gasping because he's lost so much weight, he looks so frail. And suddenly, people are realizing that he's very sick again. He denies it publicly. He puts out things that there's a hormone imbalance, which has a tiny kernel of truth to it because his liver was secreting the wrong hormones, but it wasn't just a hormonal imbalance, it's because the cancer had gone to his liver. And he's trying to deny it to himself and to the public, and this is a problem, of course.
It's a legal problem.
Well, it's a publicly traded company, and you have a great tension between two principles. One of which is you can't withhold material information from shareholders. The other is there's a certain privacy rights of the CEO.
Jobs finally took a medical leave of absence and in March of 2009 received a secret liver transplant in Memphis that wasn't publicly acknowledged until 3 months later. The doctors who did the operation could tell that the cancer had spread. But Jobs returned to work to unveil the iPad and continued working right up until the end.
What were those last 2.5 years of his life like?
He talked a lot to me about what happened when he got sick and how it focused him. He said he no longer wanted to go out, no longer wanted to travel the world. He would focus on the products. He knew the couple of things he wanted to do, which was the iPhone and then the iPad. He had a few other visions. I think he would have loved to have conquered television. He would love to make an easy-to-use television set. So he had those things, but he started focusing on his family again as well. And it was a painful, brutal struggle. And he would talk often to me about the pain.
In their final meetings, Jobs would occasionally bring up the subject of death.
I saw my life as an arc, and that it would end, and compared to that, nothing mattered. You know, I mean, you're born alone, you're going to die alone, and does anything else really matter? I mean, what exactly is it that you have to lose, Steve, you know? There's nothing.
He survived nearly 8 years with his cancer, and in the final meeting with Isaacson in mid-August, still held out hope that there might be one new drug that could save him.
He asked me at one point, he said, there could be things in this book I don't like, right? And I kind of smiled and said, yep, you know, there'll be probably things you don't like. He said, that's fine, that's fine. I won't read it when it comes out. I'll read it 6 months or a year from now.
Did you have any discussions with him that day or at any other time about an afterlife?
I remember sitting in his backyard in his garden one day, and he started talking about God. He said, sometimes I believe in God, sometimes I don't. I think it's 50-50 maybe. But ever since I've had cancer, I've been thinking about it more, and I find myself believing a bit more. Maybe it's because I want to believe in an afterlife, that when you die, it doesn't just all disappear. The wisdom you've accumulated, somehow it lives on. Then he paused for a second and he said, yeah, but sometimes I think it's just like an on-off switch. Click, and you're gone. He said, and paused again, he said, and that's why I don't like putting on-off switches on Apple devices.
Go to 60minutesovertime.com to hear Steve Jobs compliment Facebook and complain about rivals Google and Bill Gates.